And then very quickly, since we do have some new people, I would like to introduce Dan to you once again. Dan Walsh is the best-selling author of 25 novels that are all available on Amazon, including The Unfinished Gift, Rescuing Finley, When Night Comes, and The Reunion, soon to be a feature film. Over 1.2 million copies of Dan's books are in print or downloaded. He's won both the Carol and Selah Awards multiple times. 4 of his novels have been finalists for RT Review's Inspirational Novel of the Year. Reviewers often remark about Dan's rich, character-driven storylines and page-turning suspense, even with his more inspirational books. He's been writing full-time since 2010. He and his wife Cindy have been married 45 years, have 2 grown children, and 5 grandchildren. They live in the Daytona Beach area where Dan grew up, and you can follow him on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, read his blog, or preview all his books by visiting his website, danwalshbooks.com. Dan, take it away.
Okay, thanks guys for coming. I don't know if you mentioned, as you heard in the bio, that I'm hailing from the Daytona Beach area, where I came in '65 as a kid. My dad came down with the Apollo program to work on that. And after it was over, we just stayed because I pretty much grew up here. The first class, some of you were there for that, was kind of like an overview of and almost somewhat of the history of the transition, my transition, but also somewhat the transition of the publishing world from what was considered to be traditional, which really before the indie thing and the Amazon thing happened, it wasn't called traditional, it was just called publishing. Because that was the only game in town. If you wanted to be published, that's the road. Now what's emerged in the last decade or so with the emergence of Amazon, Kindle, Prime, ebooks, the whole craze, technological digital world, is the traditional world has gotten socked. It's like they hit an iceberg, but it took 10 years to sink. It wasn't like a rapid thing, but it's been a very, very major shakeup. Kind of like the shakeup that happened in the days like when the horse and buggy gave way to the auto, or when the typewriter gave way to the computer. This kind of transition, traditional publishing, which was like the same for like a century, has gone. Their whole world has been rocked in the last 5 to 10 years. Kind of talked a bit about that and my journey through that, because I had the privilege of being, quote, accepted, my first novel, by a major house in 2009. It was in all the bookstores, and that led to something of a career of the next 6 years, where 12 more novels came out traditionally, and I had great contracts, great relationships. But in that 5 or 6 year period, it happened to be the time frame when the indie world emerged and became this dominant thing, largely fueled by Amazon and largely fueled by Kindle and ebooks, and the mass exodus of readers from the bookstores to the online way of buying things. And that's kind of where all the money went. That's where people had to follow it. And so what used to be really looked down on, the idea of indie, became almost like a very major competitor to traditional. And now to this point, I think in some ways, in some places, it's actually surpassed it. But it's certainly not looked down on anymore. It's definitely a way to go. And so in this session, the second session of my class, and I should mention, if you got the outlines, there's 3 sessions. Someone brought that up. I'm not going to cover the 3rd session because this conference only had 2 slots to hire me, I guess you'd just say, and didn't have room for the 3rd slot. So I thought, well, I'll give them the bonus notes for the 3rd session, which is on marketing, rather than cut them off. Figured, those of you who might be interested could read it, maybe get something out of it, even though I won't be teaching on it. I'm really going to be keeping my comments in this hour on what is considered the second part of the class, called Making It Happen, from rough draft to book launch. So it's the idea, if you've got your manuscript written, maybe it's a Word document, a lot of people use Word, and you think you're ready to go, what's it going to take from that moment to actually launching a book on Amazon or some other online store? That's what we're going to talk about. So the first thing that I'm going to mention is that the very, very first and most important thing after you, quote, finish your book, they say books are not written, they're rewritten. There's the process of rewriting and cleaning up and polishing and getting the book really, really ready. And In the traditional publishing world, that process is controlled by the publishing house. You may, if you're trying to get in, and this was in my case, what I read, I was a pastor, so I didn't have any connections in the publishing world. So I went to my Barnes and Noble and I bought like 8 or 10 books on how to write fiction well. And I read them all and used those books to help take a hatchet to my work. And then I had some proofreader friends in church and asked them to take a hatchet to my work and got it as cleaned up as I could. And that's what I sent to the agent in New York. And apparently I did it well enough that I was let in, and that started the whole ball rolling. But obviously, once I was with my publisher, I found out that the real way this is done is the publisher, if they accept you, they have a staff. There's the main editor, usually the acquisitions editor or the developmental editor actually will edit the actual book, the big picture stuff. And then they have an additional, usually 1 or 2 other editors that will clean up things in terms of timeline and typos and proof. Well, that person, if you're indie, that doesn't exist. If you're going to go indie, you're going to have to really consider the very most important thing is you don't want to upload a book unless it's error-free. All errors need to be gone. And I'm not just talking about typos and misspellings. The kind of work that an editor do has to be done if you want to be successful as an indie. And really, in this part of the class that I'm going to teach now was not in my notes until this past year. If I taught the same class a year or 2 ago, the next 15 minutes of what I'm going to talk about, I didn't talk about. But a problem has emerged. And I'm going to share this with a screen to try to share screen. Here we go. Where are we now? Where's my... Hold on here a minute. Oh, there it is. Sorry. Share that one. Took me a while to figure it out. Okay. Here's the problem. You probably recognize this picture of Tom Hanks on the Apollo 13. Houston, we have a problem. That's the classic line from that movie. I think we need to replace that with indies. We have a problem. I've become aware of a significant problem that's occurred in the indie world. What's happened is, and as I mentioned, it's a quality control problem. In the traditional world, you don't have books getting on the shelf without going through a rigorous editing process. Every author in a traditional house would tell you their editor and editing team is very involved in the success of their book. And there's no such thing as somebody writing an author writing a novel, sending it to the publisher, and the publisher like, well, it's ready to go. It goes through a rigorous editing process, and then it's cleaned up to a point where then it's finally considered ready to go, and it's released. Problem with the indie world is, I was mentioned, most of the, I think if I remember reading, is something where 90 to 95% in that era of submissions to traditional houses were rejected. So here you have these authors that felt like they did their best job to get their book ready to send to the publisher or an agent, and they just get rejected over and over and over again. Authors I've talked to, some of them, it was their 5th or 6th book that finally got accepted. And these are this is like a little joke thing. These are some of the things that they hear in their rejection letters. Not accepting the genre. I reject many worthy projects, not commercial enough, not too similar to something on my list, not accepting new writers, not right for me, just didn't fall in line with our, better look elsewhere, not fit my, these are the kind of things that people would hear and they would not really know why. Hey, really, what's wrong with my book that you keep turning it down? And people would be turning it down. And so someone would be thinking, my friends are saying it's great. My wife says it's great. My husband says it's great. My critique people feel it's great, and you keep rejecting it, and they couldn't get in. And here's what happened with the indie world. With the indie world, it's kind of whosoever will. Amazon doesn't have that gatekeeper rejecting 90% or 95% of the people who submit. If you are on Amazon, submitting to Amazon, they, I mean, they don't want typos and misspelled words, but as far as the quality and all the stuff that an editing staff, they don't go for, they don't do that. They just kind of decide, we're going to let reviewers decide. We're going to let readers decide whether a book is successful or not. And they let you upload the book if it just, looks right. So here's what I think the problem is. We've had this now freedom to publish anything we want for about 7 or 8 years now. And literally tens of thousands of books that would have been rejected have now been turned into books, and they're available for sale online. I'm a part of quite a few indie boards where there are literally hundreds of authors on these boards. And I've been oftentimes, reading and being aware of this. There's a growing level of dissatisfaction and disappointment in these people's experience, because they thought now that their book was up, and their sales are very, very poor, very, very few reviews. After they get all their friends and family to leave a review, very few reviews, and they're not doing well, and they're very discouraged, and they don't know why, and they're pretty convinced it must have something to do with marketing, usually. And this is what I've observed, but here's my reason for sharing this. It would seem to me that perhaps 90%, maybe 95% of the rejected books needed to be rejected because they weren't ready. There was something wrong with them. And unfortunately, they don't have the time to tell you what's wrong with it. They just send you out a rejection form letter. So you're left with this puzzlement as to what's broken about my work. Well, then you think, okay, I'll do the best I can, and then I'll send it to Amazon, and now I am published. Well, you can feel some sort of satisfaction, I expect, having your books published and on Amazon. But at some point, if all this time goes by and no one's buying, or so few people are buying, and the ones that are buying are not leaving reviews or leaving poor reviews, that can't be satisfying. And that's what I'm hearing, a lot of this dissatisfaction, people trying to figure out. And if they find somebody who's really successful, they want to figure out they say, what are you doing? And they're usually looking for marketing solutions. That's something you've done in marketing that's opened the doors wide. Because the assumption is my work is ready to go. But here's the thing: imagine, how could it be that for all these years, all of these books were being rejected by the publishing houses as not being ready? Now that gatekeeper's removed and all those people publish, and now all of those books are suddenly ready. Because what I found, and I've talked to a lot of people who are freelance editors, they don't get a lot of work, and they go to conferences, and you're amazed. I've started to do surveys. How many people have published their books and did not hire an editor, and have not gone anything close to the rigorous process my books went through with my publishing house, and they're having this expectation that their book should be successful, and yet it's still filled with all the reasons why it got rejected in the first place, and they don't know what those reasons are. Only now, of course, and so they're still dealing with rejection, only now they're being rejected by the readers, not agents and editors. I suspect it hurts about the same, because in the end, you didn't probably intend to do this, to have your books published online and kind of going nowhere. So that's kind of like the problem. Now, when I'm saying all this, I hope I'm not sounding harsh, but I just done a lot of thinking, because when I do a lot of interacting with people online, and I keep seeing them looking for solutions in the marketing arena. And I'm thinking, what if your book stinks? What if the problem is you? What if it's your writing? What if you got some major flaws in the way you put your story together, and readers may not have the sophistication to pick out exactly what's wrong? An editor would, but you didn't talk to an editor. You didn't hire an editor. And so, instead you have this situation where you're looking at maybe some people leaving reviews, and they're not able to tell you what's wrong. They're just maybe saying, and a lot of the Christian, what I found is a lot of Christian people don't leave bad reviews, because they were taught when they were raised, if you don't have something nice to say, what? Don't say it, right? So they read this book. Oh, it's terrible. This book's terrible. And unless they're your friend, oh, you're my friend, I got to leave a review. But if they're not your friend, they're just not going to leave a review. And some might be just like, it's so bad, I have to warn people how bad this is. And then they'll leave a real bad review, which is terrible because it's just like a smear on the wall that never comes down. You can't get the stain out. So it's just like, I look at that, and I see the frustration. I think, I got to speak up. I got to warn people. I feel like Paul Revere, guys, there's a reason this is happening. You can't skip this step that all of the people who are successful don't skip. All the people who are successful don't skip this step. They all are aware. I think I'm a pretty good writer after all this time. 25 novels, really 26 now. I would never think of not having my book edited before I have it, released. And I've learned a lot. I teach classes because I understand something that is very fundamental, actually even biblical. We'll go back to the screen here for this next moment. See if I can make it a little quicker. There we go. Here's the fundamental problem. Blind spots. Everybody knows what a blind spot is from driving, right? That section in your car where you think you can change lanes and all of a sudden a horn goes blaring and someone goes off the road and they're swearing at you because you didn't see them. And you didn't see them because they were in your blind spot. A blind spot is something that is true, in speaking as metaphor, something that is true about us or our writing that we either cannot see at all or don't see clearly, but it's there. Readers don't know, like I said, they're not sophisticated, most of them, enough to know what they don't like about your book, but they can tell what they don't like. And they also know, and you guys, how many, I would say most of you probably are readers. I know I love to read. I still read all the time. And I read books oftentimes that I'd say these days, half the books I don't finish that I start. Sometimes a great premise, and then I just run into problems that I wish these people had gotten an editor or had an editor would help them see this is not okay. There's plot problems, there's character problems. Sometimes it's just even very basic things that are wrong that you realize, how did this thing get published? And you realize, well, Amazon doesn't ask those questions. Amazon doesn't put you through some kind of rigid process to make sure all the things that need to be done are in place. So in that regard, I think what's happening is, as I mentioned, our readers are the ones that are seeing these blind spots. I believe this: if indies were doing what they should be doing, this would never happen. Why? Because they would hire a good editor to get them and help them fix whatever is wrong with their books before it ever saw the light of day, before it was ever uploaded. This is, to me, why I'm taking the time to labor this point, because I found out not only does this happen, it happens a lot. And so, and I understand one of the reasons why it happens a lot is it can be a little expensive. Hiring a good editor can be expensive. And you look at that and you think, well, I wrote the book on my own time. It didn't cost me anything but my time. If I got to hire an editor, wow, when you find out what it costs, yeah, I think I can get around that. And so maybe get some critique buddies or some other people to, I've been part of, I believe in critique groups. I've been part of a critique group for 10 years. And I can tell you that every now and then they share something that really is valuable, but it does not by any means replace the work of a good editor. So that's what I'm kind of pushing here, obviously. And I don't get any, I'm not pushing any one editor. I'm pushing the concept that just accept that I need that, because of my blind spots, which I don't know what they are, I need to accept that an editor has to be part of my process if I hope to have a successful book. So how do you find an editor? Well, one of the things I would say, good editors will be aware that they have to show you their stuff. So you want to find out with reviews about editors or other people who've used them satisfactorily, who can say I have these clients, and you can contact them to find out what their experience has been. But there's obviously doing due diligence. You can find out who the good editors are You can talk to other, authors that are successful or have good experiences, and be expecting a price range. There can be some really good editors that don't charge that much because they're not well known yet. Maybe the very best ones are very expensive for a reason, because they have a large clientele because they're very good and they've helped their authors become very successful. So, that's just part of the process. There's two basic areas of editing. There's macro and micro. The macro would be the big picture editors. That's like in the publishing house, the acquisition editor, the one who takes the book, who sees the concept, who sees the quality of the writing, who sees the story, who gets the characters, and they're able to look at the big picture of where the plot works and where it doesn't, and what kind of character things need to be refined or changed or fixed or whatever. And that's really like the story side of the editing. After, in the publishing house, that editing process takes place. Then it goes to another staff where they start working on things like timeline, copy editing, proofreading, typos, which also has to be perfect. And those people, clean it all up, make sure there's nothing, there's like the word there. Is that the proper use of the word there? There's 3 different words for there, 3 different words for your, all those types of things. The words to, there's 3 different ways for to. Make sure all those kinds of things are all cleaned up, so we put forth finally on the shelf a book that is hopefully error-free, and not just with, again, typos. Even from a story perspective, it's error-free. That's the process indies have to accept if they want to be successful as an indie. There's not a shortcut in that regard. Any questions on this? Because I know it's kind of I spent a lot of time on it, but I think I've done this because it really, really matters. Everything else I say, if you don't get this, it doesn't really matter, because this one thing alone can sink you. So can I move on? I don't see any hands. Spanking over, lecture over. All right. Next, I would say, you've heard the saying, don't judge a book by its cover. In publishing, it's the opposite. A cover really matters. Obviously, if you look at a cover and you spend time on a cover, when you think as an indie, it's an area that really I've seen some really. My goal, because again, I had 12 traditionally published novels that had top shelf artists doing the covers, and so my first 2 books I had help with the covers, but I knew how much it cost to do that, and I thought, I used to do all the graphics in my church, and I'm real familiar with graphics programs. I think I can learn this. So I decided, since I'm going to put out 2 books a year, I'm going to learn this. And so I started doing I do all my covers. I've done my last probably 10 covers. And so I'm going to share with you as an example of how important covers are. The top 3 books are just 3 of my covers. Like I said, I've done 12. The one on the left was done by somebody I hired. The other 2 are ones I've done myself in the last year. The ones on the bottom one, these are indie covers. Tell me you can see a difference in the quality.
I don't know. They're pretty similar. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I'm just saying, when I saw these ones, I thought, oh my gosh. If you saw that book cover, I mean, I just don't know who would click on who would look further if you saw a cover like that. Covers there's some programs now, some really good programs to help you. I mean, I get that anybody who's tried Photoshop, it can be really, really intensive learning curve. I found a program called, it's only available, I think, on the Mac, called Pixelmator. I've made all my covers using Pixelmator, and it's almost like if you can make stuff on PowerPoint or any other art program, it's very, very easy to learn. And so I would just say, again, if you don't have the art ability or the graphic ability to do your own covers, at least make the commitment. Let's see what we have here next. Yeah, I'll leave that one there. At least make the commitment to hire someone to do a good looking cover. You want, again, the goal, the cover to be where the reader doesn't know that this is an indie book. There's nothing, the cover is attractive. It works with the story. It's compelling, appealing. Doesn't look like someone did it in a couple of hours on a art program, I guess. But again, there should be no difference for the reader in there. And so the cover, says, yeah, that's my kind of book. And then they look further. The next thing comes after that would be what they call the blurb, or it used to be called back cover blurb, the thing you read in the back of the book that tells you what's this book about. You used to go to a bookstore, you get the book out and the cover kind of speaks to you. That's my kind of book, I think. You turn it over and you read what it's about, right? That blurb is a real skill in itself. To be able to take a 300-page book and condense it down, to a paragraph that doesn't give too much away, but makes the reader say, yeah, I want to read that. That's a work, but that's something you need to get good at, or again, hire someone to do. I worked on learning how to do it because again, didn't want to hire people. I thought if I'm full-time, I have time, I can learn to do this, I want to do it. So I started making my own blurbs. Of course, I got feedback because of blind spots. I sent out my blurbs to people and got feedback. And I knew too, there's a definite space consideration. You can't be any longer than a certain amount for it to fit. But here's an example of a couple of my recent blurbs. Wish I could do this a little faster. With the Scandal of Mercy, the one it says here, Joe Boyd gets some surprising news from his wife, Kate. He barely has time to process it when he's given an assignment to confront an aging ex-con just paroled for a brutal murder committed 36 years ago. The man's on his way back there now, even though he has no friends and no family left in Culpeper. The chief's convinced this can only mean trouble. When Joe and Hank visit Sam Clemens, their instincts say there may be more to the story than anyone imagines, much more. Their captain, the courts, and everyone else in town believes this murder was solved decades ago. Are they right? Is the killer coming back to town now, or has he been here all along, roaming the streets of their lovely little town? I probably worked a whole day on that. Here's the one for Deepest Waters. This is a totally different story. This is more an inspirational story. For John and Laura Foster, what began as a fairy tale honeymoon in 1857 aboard the steamship SS Vanderveer quickly turns into a nightmare. A terrible hurricane strikes and the grand ship begins to sink. Just before it goes under, a rescue ship appears on the horizon, but it only has room enough to save women and children. Laura soon finds herself sailing away toward New York City on a ship filled with orphans and widows to meet John's family, whom she's never met. Desperate for a miracle, Laura braces herself to face life alone, inspired by a true story. Again, I put these because they've helped me sell these books, but you get the idea of what a blurb, you take to me the cover and then you take the blurb. Those are so very important and they're all very necessary for a book. Oh, I'm going too far here. They're very necessary for that book to be successful. The only question is, again, can you do this? If not, you need to hire somebody for this. But these are two more steps that have to be after the manuscript gets cleaned up and has a great editor clean it up for you. You gotta work on the cover. You gotta work on the blurb, and then after that, you're talking about design and formatting. I see. Excuse me. I just see in my notes. There's something else I have before the design and formatting.
And just to give you a heads up, Mary's got her hand up.
Oh, is her hand up? Okay, Mary, go ahead.
It was on the last blurb. I did see an editing thing on it. So the last one, the last book.
Oh, okay. What do you see?
He's given us an assignment and to confront and aging, except don't you mean and?
Oh, you know what? Actually, that's just on the slide. Thank you for pointing that out. Someone in another class pointed that out. And again, that's me. I screwed up, but I fixed it.
I know. That's why I love to edit other people's things and I can't edit my own.
That's so funny. I forgot to go fix it on the slide, but the book is fixed.
Okay.
I wonder how many people, read that. Probably hundreds of people read that because it never showed up in the reviews. Someone sent me a kind, email, and then someone else picked it up in a class. But great eye, Mary. That's good catch.
You could leave it on the slide and then use that as a little, eye catcher thing. Like, hey, did anybody notice?
Yeah, I can make it like I did it on purpose, right? No, that was fun. I'm glad you got that. The other thing I'm going to bring up is endorsements. I've had lots of people look at this because they, traditional books, they always seem to go for like big name endorsement. So I can get somebody and read my book and endorse my book before it goes out. And my publisher used to leave a couple extra months for endorsements. I think in the new world, they don't matter. What I would say, instead of endorsements, what matters now for book sales is reviews. Reviews matter so much more to readers. Most readers don't look at those endorsements anymore. For one thing, if they're buying online, they're not looking at the cover. I mean, the back of the cover, I should say, where the endorsements might be. They have to scroll down and see them. Most of them look right at, I mean, if you're like me, when I'm looking at a book, I look for the reviews. I look at the cover, I read about it, and I look at the reviews. And so I would say, I would not waste your time pursuing big name reviews. I would instead be thinking of what's the best strategy to increase the reviews for my book. And there's ways you can do that. Obviously, some of those ways are in creating a team of people that once your book is totally polished and ready to go, that you give your book to complimentary with a request that if they like your book, they'll review it when it comes out. But you obviously, I would never go into buying reviews or anything like that. Amazon has learned how to pick out, scam type things and services where people get reviews because they understand how valuable reviews are. But I'm just bringing this illustration to show you, here's this, book with, nothing against this person, but I'm just saying, if you were a buyer and you saw a book with five reviews, 3.5 stars, versus another book with 1,500 5 stars, which one do you feel more comfortable about, checking out? You wouldn't care if this guy on the left had a bunch of endorsements by people, celebrities. So reviews really this day and age, I think, are really more important for your promoting. Again, I just did another example. Here's one with 17. Again, 3.5 reviews. This one over here, 1,400, almost all 5-star. When readers see that, and you don't have to have 1,400, even 100. See, there's a certain point, I think, we've talked about different authors about this. Most people have maybe 15 to 20 people that they can get there, like the 17 ratings. Most people can have 15 or 20 people that read their book and leave a review. But if you don't have any growing number of people leaving reviews, you have a problem, a quality problem. You don't have a marketing problem. And so I think, again, part of the reason is getting reviews. There's things that we could talk about. I wish I had time in the marketing. I don't. Because we don't, I'll throw this in there, though. Learn about marketing the back pages. If you create a book that people really want to read, when they get to the end of the book, you have a window there where you can market your other books to those people for a brief time before they click out to the next book. And so I always make the very first pages after my story ends, I start talking about my next book to the reader. Because again, if they've had that good experience and I provide a link and a click, and sometimes the first 3 or 4 chapters of the next book and a click, they'll click right on the next book and just keep it going. And I also, one of those first pages I want to help the reader. And I basically kind of play the violin about how important reviews are, that if they want to see me keep writing books, please take the time to leave a review. They matter so much for buyers. And, anyway, so reviews matter way more than endorsements. I want to mention too, though, then I'm going to the price. The one thing I skipped because I don't have a slide on it is the idea of formatting. When you get done your book in Word, when you upload it to Kindle or to whatever online store, there has to be a formatting that's different than Word. And again, you can hire someone who does the formatting. If you find out there's lots of people that do this for a living, they charge sometimes $100, sometimes $150 to format your books in the various formats you want them to, and get it all ready to go so you can just upload it to the store. Or like for me, I bought a program called Vellum. It's on Mac. I think they make them for PC too, but there's 2 or 3 other programs where you can actually do the formatting yourself, where you import your Word document into this formatting thing. And it takes a couple of hours. And after you've gotten good at it, it takes less. But it basically teaches you and reformats your book for you so your book's ready to go, ready to upload. That's definitely one of the things that has to happen. Again, either something you do or something that you hire someone to do for you. After that, I guess the next thing to talk about is price. You know, for me, it's like the price of books. I this slide is a little bit old because you'll notice I'm saying in this thing that I'm doing well, but I'm not in the 1% club. I've actually now raised my prices in the new year with inflation. I'm sure you're all feeling it. So my prices at say $3.99 now for the full length books now cost $4.99, but they don't cost $14.99. If you look at the Grisham book in the illustration, you see his book is $14.99. These very brand name authors, the ones that you guys know what the ones I'm talking about, you know, they're the ones that everybody knows. They get away with, you know, they're usually with traditional houses and they sell their books for a small fortune, and they're just such good writers and they have such a huge following. There's a few authors like that I read, and if they come out with a book, I'll pay the money, because they're just, you know, it's a guaranteed good experience. But so often, you know, and I wouldn't expect right now if I charge $14.99 that I'd get all these people buying my book, because I'm not in that club. I kind of know what league I play in. So I sell mine for $4.99. Even at $4.99, I'm making on those books 2 or 3 times per book what I used to make from my publisher. So, you know, it's still worth it to me, selling them at a discounted price. I wish I could sell them for $14.99. And I like to think they're worth that, but I have to price it what the market will bear. And since I'm still in the competitive world of, you know, what are people expecting to pay? I think because of the number of reviews I have and the quality of the reviews, you know, some people are telling me you could probably charge more. Maybe, who knows? But I still, like I said, I'm looking at this as not as the writer side, as the business side, and I don't want to price myself into a place where the sales go down because I've priced them too much, because everybody can get lots of other good books for $4.99, and if I charge $7.99, what if my sales go down? So I don't know. It's just, you know, it's a judgment call. But I'm kind of letting my, like, I jumped to $4.99 and I was kind of like shaking in my boots for a while. Was that the right call? It doesn't seem to have hurt me at all in sales. But if I made a big jump, I'd be like, yeah, I don't know. So again, it seems like the general rule of thumb is if you've got a novel that's small or novella, you might want it to be more like $2.99. If it's a full-length novel, $3.99 to $4.99. If you've got a really, you think if you've got a really thick book, like a historical novel with 100,000 words or more, it may seem hard to sell that for that kind of price. You can experiment if you want with a higher price, but again, the question is, what will the readers pay? Especially if you don't have a readership. Yes, I see Lynn.
Yes. 2 questions. How do the nonfiction books get priced? Is it similar? And what about the Kindle Unlimited? How do you know when to offer your book for that, and how much do you make off of that?
We will talk about Kindle Unlimited in just a moment.
Okay.
So I'll answer the other question. I don't know the world of nonfiction or how it differs. I wish I could speculate for you, but I think it probably would be better. Maybe in the conference, there are others that are teaching on nonfiction that specialize in nonfiction. I've only ever written one nonfiction book, a devotional, and it's selling terribly. I thought I wasn't even going to publish it, but a lot of friends really loved it and thought you should put that out there for people. And because they love your books, they'll probably buy it. No, they don't. I mean, and I don't need it. I mean, I think I dropped the price to 99 cents just because I'm not making any money on this thing anyways. But so I'm just not the guy to ask about nonfiction.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Dan, can I mention one thing?
The Kindle Unlimited in a moment. As a matter of fact, I'm looking at my notes, and that's actually the next thing we're going for.
Hey, Dan, before you move on, I just wanted to mention, and this may have changed, but as I understand it, as long as you're between $2.99 and $9.99, then you get that 70%. But once you go above that, I think it knocks down to like 35%. So you might actually be making more than John Grisham.
Who wouldn't that be some? No, but I know the first part we said, I know for sure is true. $2.99 is the break point where you can still get 70%. Anything less than $2.99, Amazon will pay you 35. But for $2.99, and I guess you're saying there's a ceiling. I didn't know there was.
I think it's $9.99.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to be having to test that ceiling for a while anyways. I got one of my books that's looking like going to be made into a movie by an Oscar-winning producer. Could be this year. That happens, maybe we'll revise this whole thing. I still won't go up to $14.99. I don't know. Maybe I'll jump to $7.99. We'll see. But again, I got to stay where my lane is. You got to know your lane is the point in your pricing. All right. Now the question about Kindle Unlimited, the bigger question is, do I want to go wide? Or do I want to go with Amazon exclusively? That's a big question that indies have to ask, because most people in principle don't like the idea of going with all your eggs in one basket. I want to say up front, all my eggs are in one basket. I'm with Amazon exclusively. In the beginning, I tried going wide, which was Amazon and all these other smaller outfits. Barnes & Noble used to be the second, and they're not even close anymore. Kobo, Barnes & Noble, different options. We'll talk about it with a graph here in a moment. But one of the benefits of going with Kindle exclusively is they create, and this is one of the reasons why they're doing so well. They created this program called Kindle Unlimited, and you can see what it says there, for $9.99 a month. It's really the equivalent of like one paperback book, or maybe a couple of ebooks. You can read all of the books in a month that you can handle. So especially if you're somebody who's retired or really a chain reader, you can just knock out 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. I know some people read 10 or more books a month. They're just really into reading, and they pay one price. And all the books that are in this Kindle Unlimited program, even though it's quote free to them after that one price, Kindle pays per page to the authors. So they made it per page because they're obviously, again, incentivizing writing good books. Because if the reader reads all the way through your book, you get the full amount of those pages, depending on how many pages you have per book. It's a little bit less than, I think, like on a book that it's like sells for $3.99, let's say. I used to make like about $3, let's say, and I would make maybe more like $2 on the Kindle Unlimited. But the difference is there's a huge audience. Kindle Unlimited has grown over the last several years to include millions of readers, literally millions of readers. And when I first started off, it was just a slice of my income. Now it's more than half every month of my income comes from Kindle Unlimited. And those readers aren't going to likely buy books in other avenues. They're Kindle Unlimited. That's their place. So if you don't go with Kindle Unlimited, you're not going to reach these millions of readers. So I have to say, at this point, I wish I could say, let's diversify here, Amazon. But this is the reality. This graph here shows you, this is the percentage of online sales. The lime green is Amazon. The orange red one is everybody else. That's how things are right now. And this is a graph that breaks it down even a little bit more. This graph shows you percentage of ebook sales. That big kind of orange peach color, that's Amazon, and the yellow one is Kindle Unlimited. And if you see between those two, that's 83% of the pie. And look at all the little slices that you have. You remember Nook? Nook used to be such a thing. Nook has shrunk to almost nothing. Look, they're all single digits. Other is doing better than Nook. So it's just, and the other thing with Amazon, they've got this, they create this dashboard for you. Even as an author, I've been with them now for several years, since 2015. It's so easy to use. It's just as easy as the Kindle is to read. The dashboard is so easy to work with. There's a part of me that wishes I wasn't feeding the beast. That I had all these mom and pop people I could give my business to. They're just not there. And I wish they were, but I can't fix that. So I have to put my business hat on, the guy who's paying the bills and taking care of my family. And this is just, I have to say, when people ask me, this is what I recommend. It's the most, lucrative return on your investment. If you, in principle, don't want to do that, that's not a problem. For me, I wouldn't hold that against you. I'm just saying, from a standpoint of economics, going with Kindle exclusively, KDP, they call it Kindle Direct Publishing, it makes sense for me financially. But again, I have friends that will just refuse to do that, because to them, I'm just not going to give all my business to these guys. And especially after this last election, how political they got, it was hard. I understand that. So I'm just purely talking economics here when I say this. Any questions on this part before I shift? I think I only got a couple more minutes. Then we got to, oh, actually, I'm just looking at this. We're about to run out of time for any Q&A, right?
Yeah, and I never saw a notification, so I'm
What did you say?
sorry. I didn't see a notification come through either,
Oh,
so
yeah,
I apologize.
Well, it'd be nice if they let us go over. I just
Yeah.
was saying here, look, I'll just throw this out for free. I recommend taking the extra time to even though ebooks is so big, it doesn't, once you develop this art program stuff and you learn how to do it, it doesn't take that much extra to develop the print books. And you don't make as much maybe, and you don't sell as much, but I still love doing it. So I still take the extra time in all of my books that I produce, including all the ones I got the rights back. I create print books for them. I think they're worth doing. The last thing I have on mine is I think it's about planning. I just threw up. This is a photocopy, you know, like screenshot of one of my Excel pages. I plan out my whole schedule, everything to do with writing, researching, writing, and all the various things that go into all these steps that I just talked about. I lay them all out and I work out a schedule, and I kind of hold myself accountable. In this particular graphic, the yellow are the things that I've already done with this particular book. I think since then I've done all of these things now because it's back in November. But it's really important to plan all these different steps and keep chart. And Excel is just a very easy program to use, you know, so I just created a simple program. I just reproduce it with every book I do so that I can make sure I can keep track of, you know, the scheduling of things. And if I make something gets off track, I go ahead and take the time, even though it's just me. I'm not working for anybody, just so I can keep track. I make sure I keep track of everything along the way. So I have a target, I have a date in mind for launching the book and all the things that need to lead up to it, and make sure I have the time to do them in a way that's not stressful. So I think that's all I could cram into this one. I do have a question there about what people had asked me about, do indies need agents? And my short answer is no. I had a wonderful agent in my years of traditional, but I really, unless you're working with a traditional or maybe an independent house that you just a little bit nervous about, I don't know that it's really necessary to have an agent.
Mary's got her hand up.
Who's that? Okay, Mary.
Yeah, I just had a question. Do you have a list of editors that you use?
No, because I haven't told you the whole story. I don't know if I have time. Becky, will they cut us off if I'm talking?
I'm not really sure. And I just realized that for some reason, I'm only seeing my own chat. Like I don't see, so if he was sending notifications, I missed them. So I'm sorry.
Maybe we're gonna be a couple of rebels.
Hopefully he'll let us stay.
Are there any classes after this one?
Let me check the screen real quick.
No, they're pitches.
Not in a classroom. It's the pitch session.
All right. Well, I won't take long, but I'll say
We'll
this.
see what happens.
If we get cut off, it'll be because, you know, we had no control. Mary, my wife edits all of my books, and she was the de facto editor for all of the books that I published with Revell. I had a Revell editor when I sent in that unfinished gift. Now, my wife, turns out, I just happened to marry a crazy good developmental editor. Who knew? I mean, that's not what she did for her living. She was a pastor's wife. And then when I retired to write full time, she got trained to become a dog trainer. She trained like 1,000 dogs. She was like a wizard with dogs. She was not an editor, but she had a crazy good knack. And really, because when I was writing, I would read everything I wrote to her. End of the day, what do you think? And she would edit it. So over the time, she just got very good at, and of course she's a fiction reading lover, so she could tell if something, and she only read quality books. She never read junk books. She only read high quality books. So she was always comparing me to the high quality books she was reading. So she turns out when I submitted that unfinished gift, my very first novel, to my publisher, the thing that freaked them out the most, it was 98% ready to go. They sent me the actual changes they sent me to change before they're ready to print it was a paragraph with 2 suggestions that I was able to do in like 2 hours. The second book, when I turned in, same thing. By the third book, my editor said to me, "What's going on here? We have a whole bunch of 8 authors here, and we allow 4 to 6 weeks for rewrites. because that's how much rewrites when we go through the editing process. And we almost never have that with you. What's going on? And I told him her name is Cindy. And basically she edits the book as I'm writing it, chapter by chapter as we're going. And by the time we get done, I just send to you what she approved of. And they said, bring her to the next conference. We went to the next conference and they wanted to meet where they actually offered her a job because she was that good. And so, and the agent even said, because in those ones that when they win awards, the author's name's on the award, but so is the editor. And of course, the editor in record was the editor with the publisher. And she said, I almost feel guilty because I'm just, cleaning up a little bit. Your wife is doing the hard work. So when I left to become an indie, I had a very unique privilege to have this one top shelf editor who is my wife also. So I don't know how I can, she doesn't want to do it for anybody else. People have asked, well, what will she charge? She doesn't want to do it. So, but I know that the editing work that she does for me, she does it out of love for me, but she's also very good at it. And I listen to her like I did my, like the author that I was in charge. And I would say this, I'll throw this in if I have a moment. If you hire an editor, which you should, you need to give them the permission to be ruthless with you about what needs fixing. So you gotta understand the dynamic here is different. When you have a publisher, a traditional publisher, they're in charge, you're not. You have to do what they say if you want the book to be published. You're in a submissive role to them. In an indie role where you're hiring the editor knows if I say too much, they might not hire me again because their feelings are hurt. And you don't want that editor to hold back from you to hurt your feelings. You want that editor to give you their best advice. So you need to tell them, I want you to treat this relationship like it's a traditional house and you're a traditional editor, and I want to know what needs to be fixed. Now, you don't have to do what they say because you are in charge of the project, but it's in your best interest to hear everything they think and weigh it very seriously about whether that's a blind spot or not. Because really so much, I think if this process was followed, so many of the books that are out there now as self-published books would not be out there, or else they'd be out there in a very cleaned up condition and would have much better sales. How are we doing, Becky?
So far, they haven't cut us off. So we have Lynn has her hand up.
Oh, hey, Lynn.
Hey, how many hours a day do you work in order to finish 2 books a year?
Let's see. I kind of have to do any of the non-creative writing stuff I do in the morning, and I don't get up crack of dawn, but I'll work 2 or 3 hours taking care of any marketing, email, and if I'm in that little window that I pointed to in that list, let me get rid of this screen here. If I'm in that window where I'm like a couple of weeks before or after, I might spend more than this, but I'll have like 2 or 3 hours in the morning of all the non-creative, and then I'll have lunch, and then I basically go into my cave, so to speak, and I just write all afternoon. And my goal every day is I call it keeper chapter a day. So I write 5 days a week, and my goal is to write 1 keeper chapter a day, meaning that it's really good, it's really ready to go. Before the day is over, and maybe sometimes I'll do it every 2 or 3 days, I'll read it to Cindy to make sure I'm on track. And I'll basically be getting like 5 chapters a week. And with that schedule, I'm able to get out the book. See, my books, because I'm kind of editing along the way, they're mostly cleaned up by the time I finish. And I still send it to a proofreading team and give them like 3 weeks to hack at it. But it probably takes me about 4 months to write a book that's kind of ready to go. And then spend about 4 or 5 weeks with all the marketing and various other things. So about every 5 months, I'm releasing a new book. And the couple months in between is just me going to conferences or Christmas or Thanksgiving or whatever else. Libby, I think I see a hand, but you're muted.
Libby, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. I wanted to tell Mary Teresa that I have an excellent editor, and she is actually a speaker tomorrow. Her name is Michelle Chenoweth. Mary Teresa, her name is Michelle Chenoweth, and I have been working with her for quite a while. I took her book coaching class, and then she has been editing my current novel right now. And she's very kind, she's very thorough, and I think you'd be mighty pleased with her.
Well, there you go.
Mhm.
I had another question, and that had to do with, you had said you have a team of people who will write reviews for you. I've given my copies to get free reviews of my books, but do you use the same team for all your books?
Well, see, I don't actually do that anymore because I have such a readership now. When I release a book, it's not uncommon for me to get.
Dan, I'm sorry to interrupt. We have about 3 minutes until the pitch sessions start. Can we please wrap it up?
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I'll just say this. I don't have that team anymore. In the beginning I had, it was hard work getting it, and I would try to get for like 30 or 40 people. And then, eventually it kind of faded away as my readership grew, became somewhat unnecessary. I guess that's all, folks.
All right. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, everybody.